Hello, everybody. Sorry for skipping last week. I needed a vacation because the world's just gone fucking mad. But back this week, and I wanted to do this again. I said it was going to be a recurring kind of show of these little councils of anarchy where I actually get anarchists together in the same room. It's super rare thing that happens. But it's really fun. So I got two recurring guests, two of my favorite people on Twitter. First up, we got Marcus from Aquarian Anarchy. What's he doing, man?
I'm doing well, man. It's been we were talking off air. It's been a long week, but I'm doing good.
Heck yeah. And then we got the one, the only, the Lord of Twitter, Ace Anarchist. How you doing, my man?
Hey guys, thanks for inviting me back.
Hell yeah. And then the special guest, someone I had in my head a list of 5 people I wanted to get on the show, and she was number one on that, and she's finally here. Miss Carey Wedler. How you doing?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Heck yeah. So obviously everyone knows who Ace is, and most people know who Marcus is on here, but because they've come on before. So Carey, do you want to give a real quick rundown of your background and how you would identify yourself, I guess?
Sure. I mean, I'm an internet anarchist, voluntarist, whatever term you want to use. I came to anarchism from the left. I was a very rabid Obama supporter. He was also sort of the catalyst that drove me away from statism, because he was it was the first chink in the armor, I guess, of wait a minute, this guy didn't do what he said he was going to do. I ended up finding Ron Paul. I saw what happened to Ron Paul when he tried to run for president in 2012. And I realized solutions aren't going to come from the political apparatus, at least in general. And that's when I became an anarchist after Ron Paul got screwed. And then I learned more about the philosophy and about the alternatives for human progress that don't involve violence and coercion and propaganda.
Heck yeah. It's funny because me and you have the same arc of I started an anarchist, but then became a communist, then became politically disillusioned. And then I went through that same thing of Obama to Ron Paul back to anarchism. So that's why I was always a big fan of your videos. Cause hey, I know exactly where you're coming from with the bitterness of feeling robbed.
Right.
It could be worse. We could all be like Bernie Sanders anarchists that, came after that. Those poor guys.
For sure.
So, yeah. So I don't know. I guess kind of just to open up with it. Michael Malice's book, which is crazy. Number 1 on fucking Amazon and sold to a whole bunch of people. Now, the kind of question I want to go, and we'll go clockwise. So starting with you, Marcus, is that just popular because it's Michael Malice, or do you think there's genuinely a whole bunch of people interested in anarchism all of a sudden?
Well, I think it's kind of a little bit of both. The cult of personality is real, but I do think there's a general trend. And I think that you're seeing it in a bunch of different places that don't really make a lot of sense when you first look at it. One of the things that's been happening lately is on our show, we had Karen Ann Harlos on this week, and the Libertarian Party, which I'm not officially a member of, none of that craziness. I've done that, but not doing that now. But what's generally happening is they're going from minarchist to anarchist. There's a resurgence of that within the party. And you can see that on the right as well. The influence that Chad, myself, and Nico have had on the Hoteps, who are generally right, also is pushing people towards anarchy and towards at least reasoned minarchy. And so I think that the curiosity is peaked. And I also think that people like everyone here who have solid opinions about how life should be, but we're not assholes. We're not out there, screaming down people. One of my mantras is be the smiling face of voluntarism. Be there, giving to the poor, doing what we are supposed to be doing. If we believe in doing things for ourselves, then we need to represent that. And that's starting to catch on, and people are seeing us for what we are and not what the government pretends we are. So I guess that would be my answer.
Yeah, it's always funny to me because any picture of me at a protest, I'm sitting there in body armor with a rifle, but I have a giant stupid smile on my face.
Right.
And it's exactly, be the smiling face. All right. Ace, what's your opinion? Is it just Malice, or do you think it's growing kind of organically or spontaneously? Either way.
Well, I certainly think it's partly malice, but then again, we could also attribute malice's following to the movement growing as well. So we could just reduce it all and say, yeah, I do think the movement is growing in a lot of ways. I do think that's a good thing. I think people who get disenfranchised politically generally seek to like marginalize viewpoints because they themselves have felt marginalized through the political process. So I think it's definitely a great way to. It's definitely a great thing to watch and watch anarchism proliferate. Essentially, yeah.
All right, and same question to you, Carey. What you think?
Yeah, I think, to be honest, I'm not super familiar with Malice's work. I bought the book, though, so I'm about to start it. So I'm wondering, well, is it people who already identify as anarchists and are like, yes, I want that, and like I want to have my world view confirmed and expanded? Or is it interest from status? I hope it's both. Honestly, I really hope it's both. But as far as the trend of people gaining interest in anarchism, I mentioned this in a lot of podcasts, so if you've already heard me say it, disregard this, but there's a speech by Larkin Rose, we were just talking about him, from 2000, I want to say 2016, in Acapulco. It's called So Small a Thing. If you just type Larkin Rose So Small a Thing into YouTube, you'll find it. But he does a little, it's not a thought experiment, but he asked people to raise their hand if they were anarchists 20 years ago. Like a few people raised their hand. He's like, what about 10 years ago? And I might be messing up the intervals, but the point is, the more recent in time he got, the number of hands that went up was exponential. Like with when you went from 10 years to 5 years, almost every hand went up. And then everybody else's hands went up when he went to, however, I might be making it up. But the point is, I think this is, the success of Malice's book is sort of a long, just the most recent development in a long train of trending toward anarchism, I guess.
Right, and I mean, either way though, if it is just there's that many anarchists and we just don't know, and there's enough of us to get us to #1 on Amazon, like awesome. Like I'll take that too,
Well, and I think too there are a lot of people who, if they were given the boilerplate definition of anarchism, it would resonate with them. I think there are a lot of people who are so checked out of the system and they just don't know that there's an actual alternative philosophy. They just know the current system isn't working. So in spirit, in mind, they're already kind of there. They just don't have the words to piece it all together, or the philosophical framework.
Yeah.
I think that also this sucks to a degree because you don't like to think of things in a collectivist framework, but at the end of the day, when Emma Goldman was out preaching, she had like 2 or 3 people that were hanging out with her. Now there are the amount of anarchists globally is measured in at least hundreds of thousands, if not millions. And that's huge. And so it becomes that, that ability to get on the bandwagon or feel more comfortable getting on the bandwagon. And I welcome that. Sure, some of these people aren't going to get all of everything and they're going to be a little bit, off. Okay, come on in here. Let me help you get you some information, do what I need to do. But I welcome anybody that's challenging the power structure of murderers and thieves. I'm about that. And I want to build bridges to that.
Hell yeah. And definitely like another thing I wanted to talk about tonight, because I had a whole post about it and it actually went viral because it was such a weird shit post. But I noticed a whole lot of people went from having black and yellow in their thing to represent that they're an ANCAP to just black flag. And the whole anarchist without adjectives thing kind of growing. And I kind of wanted everyone's opinion on that of, where do you think that's coming from? Because I know that me and Marcus have been like screaming about that for like ever, but I can't credit just us. I hope not. I'll be horrified if that's happening. But like I kind of, I know Marcus's opinion on it, so I'll ask you first, Carey. What is your feeling about like the whole anarchist without adjectives and dropping the million rainbow fucking colors and all that tribal shit?
Oh, I love it. I think it's indicative of the beauty and the versatility of the philosophy itself. Like in my dream post-status society, people can participate in whatever economic system they want, whatever ism they want, whatever they want to do, fine, as long as you're not forcing people to participate. So I think it actually is very helpful to give it sort of a broader banner, because I think it then attracts people from different sides of the paradigm as opposed to just catering to one side, which is sort of a big issue I think a lot of us address when we're looking at the current paradigm. So I'm fine just breaking the wheel and letting it be whatever resonates with people, as long as, again, they're not using force to make others participate.
Heck
yeah. I would completely agree with that. Yeah.
I was just about to ask you, Aso.
Yeah. I don't have much more to add on it than what Carey just said. So yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah, and
I want to
so
say,
nice. Oh yeah, sorry, real quick. It's so nice too because I get to drop the orange out of my banner because everyone thinks it means super straight now, which like poor Prud'hon, you know, your 200-year-old ideology is now mistaken for a Twitter meme. Big sad. So I can't even have the black and orange in my bio anymore.
right.
What were you gonna say, Marcus?
I was going to say, and what's funny is, you know, when we were like designing our logo or whatever, black and yellow became our colors. And what I find funny about that myself is I come from, you know, my first anarchist I ever read was Emma Goldman. And so, I would say that I come from the right. Because I made a trip through neocon, being a neocon for a while. But what I find funny about it is that I've come to associate black and yellow more with like voluntarism. And I will also point out, I guess, I do have some red in that little thing too, but but for me,
I say we didn't even plan it. I grabbed this Voltairine image like 5 minutes ago, and this is perfect. So,
yeah, but to me, I think that's just natural. I'm with Carey a bit on that. That this is what happens. You know. You don't think of this kind of communist or this kind of Republican. I think that, you know, whatever philosophy you come to, you generally want to seek out people that are at least close to what you believe. And we face a bit of more of a challenge in the fact that we have the state who is opposing that happening, whereas other members of the statist establishment don't have that problem. But I do think that it's kind of a natural progression.
Okay. And I guess my last kind of question I want to ask everybody, and then we'll just go free form, and we'll start with Ace this time. Who is your? I mean, I think I know the answer to this question because you told me, but I'll ask anyways. Who is one of your most favorite, not like the big name anarchists? So not like Rothbard or Bakunin or like Tucker, all the big ones, like someone a little more unknown, but you think are really should be more popular.
Okay. Oh, now I'm questioning my own beliefs here. Because I go, but like the thing is, that's a great question, but I go back and forth on this in my head like every day, so it's hard for me to pick just one. I do think it is important to read Proudhon. Proudhon is not an obscure one, so I don't even know why I threw that out. But I do think Gustave de Molinari is probably an anarchist that I think is really underrated. He was one of the first anarchists who really talked about like separating security from the state, and I think he's one that more people should definitely check out. You can, in fact, there's a website named after him, the Molinari Institute, which is an amazing website, and you can find a bunch of like market anarchist writers on there.
Bookmark.
Yep.
All right. What about you, Carey? Give me a semi-obscure anarchist.
Okay. Well, I have to say this. I don't know how obscure he is. I haven't been on Liberty Twitter. I don't know. I'm finding my way, but for me, it's Lysander Spooner. He's always been my favorite. Just because I don't know, I'm sure you've all read No Treason, Constitution of No Authority, but he's
Great.
There's like a trollish element to his writing. Like he's very sarcastic, as much as whatever sarcasm was in the 19th century, he had mastered it. So it's actually a funny read, which I think is very disarming. Otherwise, I would say, and I don't think she identified as an anarchist, but I think her articulation of liberty is very applicable to anarchism, which is Rose Wilder Lane. She was one of the founding philosophers of libertarianism, but I love the way she describes, she sort of just pits this idea of central planning and trying to control human energy against the idea of freedom and letting people do as they will. And she creates a lot of really good, just what's the word I'm looking for? Juxtapositions of the difference and the consequences of that I think I had never heard it articulated in that way. And the person who told me, well, she inspired Larkin Rose, which is how I came to read Rose Wilder Lane. And so my third one is Larkin Rose. And I know he's very popular, but I don't think he's popular enough because he's so blunt. And so to the point, like he just eviscerates any logical retort. It's just like, well, yeah, I took his Candles in the Dark seminar as well, which I highly recommend to everyone watching this podcast, anyone wanting to spread the ideas of liberty. He changed a lot of my perspective and my approach of what worked. So I'm very grateful for that, but Larkin Rose as well.
Hell yeah.
And Rose Wilder Lane's book, The Discovery of Freedom, is an amazing book. It's really good.
And then obviously I got to throw mine in.
Yeah.
Goddamn Max Stirner, which by the way, I just found out yesterday that that's not his real name, and the German translation is Big Forehead. So this dude literally put his pen name is Big Forehead or Big Brain essentially. And like I do love his philosophy. I do love his kind of foundational arguments about how in anarchism, no matter how much like moralism and like the NAP and everything you put on everything, if the people around you don't care about that, then they don't care about that. So you have to like acknowledge that reality. Plus, like he told Karl Marx to his face to get a job. So like, how can you not love the man? You know?
For sure.
and somebody put in Basat, which is another troll. I do like Basat.
What's funny is for me, the people that I would call to that need recognition, they're actually already recognized, but not for being what I would say precursors to what we call anarchy. And those are people like John Locke, who definitely pointed us in this direction. Thomas Paine definitely pointed us in this direction. And people
George
like
Mason.
Patrick Henry.
Big George Mason
Yeah,
guy.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, and you know, and to throw a woman in there, you know, oh, her name escapes me right now. She was an anti-federalist too. My wife's gonna kill me. Cannot remember her name.
And that was the last
I had it and
podcast
it
Marcus
left.
was ever seen upon.
I know. But anyway, but I also want to point out, because I went really old with those, I want to point out somebody who I think is an up and coming anarchist that need, and you're going to hear this a lot from me because these are a group of people that I have found my brothers, and that'll hit a little harder in a moment. That's Hotep Jesus. He had, when he kind of converted to anarchism, if you haven't seen him on Tim Pool, go check that out. He laid out voluntarism right for anyone that's there. And my co-host, Chad, is directly responsible for that happening. He introduced Hotep Jesus to Rothbard, and I followed that up with Spooner, and boom, now you have somebody with a huge following in a Black community who is preaching anarchy every week. And that's going to mean something, and it's going to mean something very soon.
Yeah, Spooner is like the Republican Slayer. Like even like the most hardened neocon, because I got one guy that kind of identifies that to read Spooner, and he's like, I still don't agree, but this is a good guy. And I think some of the ideas apply. He got really hung up on the intellectual property thing, but it was like, yes, like Spooner's really good for that. And obviously, like I've been like I went on Pete Quinhone. I always fuck his name up. Pete Quinhone's show last night, and we talked about Voltairine. So people are starting to find Voltairine a lot more, and whole like anarchist without adjective stuff. And you're seeing like the mutualism stuff come back, which is nice to me, because it might be like an elitist scumbag thing to say, but like when I open Twitter and I just see like a red and black or like a yellow and black, I'm like, oh, you just got introduced to like anarchism. Probably not always, but like to a degree, there's a lot of people that are just like, oh, super capitalism or super communism, and they throw it up there. But when I start seeing like all the other colors or no color at all, I'm like, oh, okay, you're probably like starting to get like deeper into this. You're probably reading some other people, you know, and that's always good. Obviously, the best example of that is a unironic ANCAP became unironic anarchist, and I was like, yeah,
right,
huge win.
I also think it's important, like for people, especially to be careful about associating their entire identity over like a certain like political label. You know, like when if I see a person on Twitter who has just red and black and red and yellow, it's not that I dislike the person, of course, obviously, but it's like, you know, I feel like you should not form your entire identity around this one single political belief. Even if you really do believe it, you know, I think it's important to show people that, hey, I'm not just this caricature of a specific ideology. You know what I mean?
Right. And just the idea of forming teams as an anarchist against other anarchists, that's always the most surreal thing. Because I guess I can get your guys' takes on this. Because obviously, I mean, we've all probably seen or experienced the ANCOM that's like ANCAP can't exist because it's a hierarchy and blah, blah, blah. But I've started to experience the other thing, like the opposite direction, which is really weird, of like Rothbard people and HOP people saying that you can't. The prompt was, I said, if there was an anarcho-communist commune that was on a piece of property that they owned, would you care? And most people were like, of course. Like, why do I care if there's a bunch of hippies like doing communist stuff over there? Right. If it's voluntary, it's not my problem. But there was this argument that broke out that if you allowed any form of collectivism to form, then it would form a government, and then the government would come after you. And the kind of thing I want to like pose off of that and expand upon that is, aren't we all anarchists because we think people could do better? And isn't like the idea that if we like someone makes the wrong choice, then we need to stop that because it's going to come after us? Like that kind of how I would put it, I think.
Well, yeah. How do you stop it too? Like I didn't see the poll, so I don't know how people phrased it, but it's like we can't allow people to join collective groups or identities. Right. I mean, something that actually, when I was still a statist, something that really resonated with me in college, and I had no inkling of anarchism at all. I hadn't even questioned Obama at this point. But I had a professor who said the nation...
Was that when you posted that picture of you with the Obama 08 sign? Was that around that time period? Yeah, that was right around then. Yes, that was it. And I had this professor, and he made a very clear distinction between the nation and the state. At least definitionally. I don't even know if that's word definitionally, but at least by definition. In practice, it's pretty hard to separate the nation from the state because they're all melded together, especially in America, in my opinion, because of the origin story of America with the Constitution, which is establishing a government. But I think in general, just to take that, you can have collectives. Do I want to be a part of it? Probably not. But why can't people just gather voluntarily how they want? I don't understand. Right. I personally, and I have my own opinions, obviously, on what form of economic system would work most efficiently. But it seems like all of this infighting, and I don't want to generalize it all. I don't want to collectivize everyone, but it seems like a lot of it is ego driven. It's like, no, I'm right. And I'm going to show you why I'm right and you're wrong. And you're going to submit because I'm right. And like, believe me, if you watch my videos, I certainly have that streak. Like, obviously I want to tell you why I'm right and you're wrong. But as far as like the bickering among anarchists too, it's like, just be free, live free. Yeah, like all your videos though, Carey, are like to normies and statists. So
right. I don't address the anarchists.
Yeah, but it's super weird when people within anarchism are like that. And I did this whole thread about this because I went back and read Voltaire's Anarchism, and she has this whole passage in this where she compares this idea to colonialism, which I think is perfect. And I've been using this argument constantly of like, How is like an urban New York anarchist going to go to South Vietnam in the jungle and go up to somebody and be like, hey, this is the form of anarchism you need to do? Like, right. How's that work? And or the opposite of how like, if you have like anarcho frontier person or like some rural Texas super ANCAP guy, and he goes into like Hong Kong where it's just 100,000 people stacked on top of each other in one building, and he just like says like, this is how you have to do it. How it doesn't make any sense. Like we embrace the individuality of all of this, but then we become really universalist and preachy and religious about it. And it's like,
Yeah, I agree. I think that ultimately, for me, a lot of this comes from. I see this just as kind of like a duh, because I everybody knows I was massively influenced by Adam Kokesh, and his idea of localism is the way to make that practically happen, and that's what Carey was talking about, where, we don't have to tell that community what the hell they're doing. That's up to them. That's up to their locale. But I think it also goes a little deeper than that and it's why when I'm describing myself generally, I use the word anarch instead of anarchist, because to me, an anarchist is someone who is practicing anarchy, and we are not practicing anarchy. Now, we might make the argument that every more actions in our day might be anarchist based or whatever, but ultimately we live within a state. But at the end of the day, Buddha's right when he says that internally we decide to be free, and we are free. Well, if you have a monarch and you have an oligarch, I'm an anarch. I rule myself, and you cannot rule anyone if you are an anarch, because you recognize their individuality and their own self-rulership. So I think that ultimately that's just what's going to bring us together. And again, and I know that we all agree with this, but you're right. There are people out there that do not. And I've seen it. People have attacked me. Why is there red in your symbol? And I'm like, because I like red. I didn't stop liking red just because I like Rothbard. Stop getting triggered over a fucking color. Who gives a shit what color somebody is using and they identify with? Now, I don't think there's anything wrong with tribalism, because that's just how you identify your kind of people. Everybody here likes a big A, and so to me, this is just natural progression towards that ultimate anarchist utopia that we will get to.
That's why I've been like really annoying about posting Sterner all the time with his concept of spooks or geists. It's like the colors are a spook, like the ANCAP combo. That's all spooky. It doesn't matter. It's not real. Like don't get married to this stuff. And I see people like getting tattoos of like, I'm gonna be an ANCAP forever. And they get like I saw somebody post, they got like a Rothbard tattoo, and I'm like, oh cool, I like Rothbard too, but like. You have no idea what you're going to believe in like 5 years,
right.
6 years. You have no idea. Like, we've seen this progression. So getting married to these ideas and these practices, and a lot of people get mad at me, but also like the writings of a bunch of old dead men. Like I love Voltairine. I love Spooner. I love Rothbard. I love, Bookchin, like all these people, but these are old dead dudes. Okay. Like we can go forward and take these same ideas and update them to be more modern, or say them differently, or embrace them personally, or have our own versions of it. I know there's a big issue in like the Ayn Rand objectivist community of like, if Ayn Rand didn't say it, then it's not objectivism. And it's like, we don't have to do that, guys. Like,
right.
Yeah. Ace quietly lurking in the corner.
Oh yeah, no, sorry, yeah, no, I didn't have much to add because I pretty much agreed. Yeah,
this is going to be Ace being like, "Yep,
yes, I agree." Yes, I agree.
Right on. Which is different for him based on his Twitter.
That's right. That's very true.
Since I started following this dude, man, I think I share more of him than anybody else. Because man, you own people.
Oh, I appreciate that. That's very kind. Thank you.
So, yeah, like I said, I have to be careful not to share too much of Ace's stuff, because then my timeline will just get annoyed.
Exactly. Yeah. I think, though, what we're developing towards, to kind of kick off from what you were saying, Magnus, is we're moving from theory to practice. And that's what's happening in our movement. One of the things that I am proud of is that through my activism, I teach taking action. I think that I'm relatively well read. I've not read everything. I've not read everyone. I'm open to reading new things. But it's not about that. If you get anarchy is not that goddamn hard to figure out. Right. It's really not. It's don't hurt people. It's really simple. And so how do you put that in practice? And I think what we're seeing in our movement is the movement to action, to offering solutions, to, instead of just saying, hey, this is my ideal. No, actually putting it into place, watching my brothers and sisters feed the homeless. That's the kind of thing we should be doing, and taking direct action, making things happen. And this isn't to throw shade on people who just do podcasts. I get it. That's cool too. And education is important. But I think that as we move, we're going to see more solutions, and that's going to scare the hell out of a bunch of statists, because that's their number one thing, is that, but you guys you just talk a bunch and you don't actually do anything. Well,
yeah, it's the
I got
movement of
news for you.
ideas. That's the criticism I've heard all the time.
Yeah. And
For
you know,
sure.
Marcus, going to your point about how, you know, anarchism is actually like really easy to understand. There, like one of my favorite descriptions of anarchism is that other people are not your property, right? And that's kind of it. That just encompasses the whole thing. And,
Yeah, it's that simple.
Everything else is just a practical question after that.
Okay, so I did tell people that I was going to open up to questions, and this is the first one we got. So we're gonna go counterclockwise this time. It should pop up on the screen. Carey, take your shot at that.
Oh God. What could be a possible anarcho solution? Okay, I'll just be upfront. I don't know very much about Bill Gates' history and how he rose to power. If I had to guess, I would assume, tell me if I'm wrong, I would assume he took advantage of state authority in some way or colluded with the state in some way. So I don't want this to be like a cop-out answer, but one, I'm not going to talk about stuff I don't know. If I were more familiar with him in particular, I would probably have a more fine-tuned take. But yeah, pass it to somebody else, to be honest, because I don't know. But I bet if I get off of this live stream and I look up Bill Gates, I will find a lot of shady endeavors with government that would get him to a point where he would be releasing millions of genetically modified mosquitoes. And also, I think the whole concept of genetically modified has been pioneered and pushed by corporatists, again, who had the backing of the US government, who were encouraged. I wouldn't be surprised if there are subsidies. That is, fact check me on that, because I do not know.
Yes.
I'm not certain, but I think so much of it does come down to the abuse of state authority and just, as a result, just state authority in general. But I'm going to pass to somebody who probably has a hotter take than me.
To your point, just so people know, just a month ago, Bill Gates was working with the Swedish government to block out the sun in Sweden,
Right.
and the Swedish government had to pull the plug on it. So yeah, like Bill Gates is a government actor for sure.
Yeah,
All right,
he's definitely acquired a lot of his power from the state, certainly. Like, especially, you know, just considering like things like IP law and things like that, and other things in state subsidies, he's definitely acquired much of his power from that. As for the question, what solution would there be to genetically modified mosquitoes? Well, I don't mean to, like, you know, be cheeky about this, but I would also just ask, well, what's the state solution to this too? You know, because whenever we're discussing this, there's always an assumption that sometimes there is a perfect answer and sometimes there isn't. You know what I mean? So we always have to say, okay, well, could the anarchist solution, whatever it is, be better than the state solution? And I would say probably, yeah, I would assume so. So I don't necessarily have a correct answer in the sense that, oh, this is obviously the answer. But I would say that if he's trying to release genetically modified mosquitoes, I would certainly see that as, you know, a breach of the NAP. You know what I mean? And I think you could use force to stop him. So what exactly that would look like, I don't know. But that's just my take on it.
I mean, we're seeing the perfect example right now of our government and China were colluding together to make a super virus in a fucking lab. And what was the government's solution to that problem? You know, like,
can I add one thing?
Yeah, go for it.
I'm just going to add one thing because I don't want to interrupt you after. So this actually talking about into a general population, I just want to come back momentarily to the idea of private property rights, because I'm going to bring it back to college, something statist I learned in statist college, but it actually really, so again, something that stuck out and just seemed like, that isn't right. So I took constitutional history and I was taking the first segment of it. And a lot of it was about railroad history because it was so entrenched with the government. And there were court rulings that found that, say, like a piece of ash or a piece of fire came off a train that was going through any given property, any given city. If it flew off the train and landed on someone's house and caught their house on fire, the railroad was not liable because the government said so, because the government was in bed with railroads and they had a vested interest. They were colluding together. And I'm not saying railroads are inherently bad, but the way that they were built was very much a statist endeavor. But were there respect for private property rights, they would have been liable for damaging someone's property. And if you accept that you own yourself, you are your own property, then there's something to be said, at least philosophically. I don't know about tangibly, but I think there's something there as far as someone releasing something that could harm people onto private property.
Right. Yeah. To add on to that, like before the state really got involved with the railroads, if some other company or something damaged someone's property, that person could file a tort and actually get them, get restitution from them. And the state essentially said, no, we're going to allow them to actually do this now. And your property rights don't matter.
Yep.
Yeah, and Walter Block did it was actually on, I believe he was covering environmentalism, covering very similar ideas and talked about that it was, a monopolization of property when they went from recognizing air and water as different than land. Initially, they were the same. If it was your lake, it was your lake, and the same kind of pollution that if somebody dropped trash on your land, it's the same as dropping it into your lake. It was government that decided that, oh no, we own the air and we own the water, that changed that. And I do want to point out to Carey's point about not knowing everything there is to know about Bill Gates. I would agree with that. I don't know everything there is to know about Bill Gates. But if you want a really good explanation, thecorbettreport.com, James Corbett covered that thoroughly for several episodes. And I really would recommend, if you want to know the evil that is Bill Gates, James Corbett covered it thoroughly.
Yeah, he's a monster of the government, and I guess this is. I'm assuming this is directed at Carey with the railroad question here of if that damage happened by accident and there was no malevolence whatsoever. My real quick answer to that is intent matters, but at the same time, like if I accidentally leave my car in drive and it goes down the driveway and like kills your dog, well, sorry, but I still did it. So yeah.
Yeah, being an anarchist doesn't mean you're not a dick. And
right.
and if you ran somebody's dog over, don't be a dick. Do something about it.
Yeah, but I feel like everybody got the same answer to that of like it doesn't matter if it's purely. I mean, it obviously probably affects it a bit, but like
I would say like your intent affects like what happens afterwards, like what type of restitution you might owe to the person, but it doesn't affect if it was actually a violation, right? You can violate someone's rights completely by accident. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure, we probably do that every day. It just because I do stupid shit. The thing that people really don't get, that freedom means that it doesn't mean that you're not going to have stupid shit happen in your life. That's going to happen. It's the assurance that it's definitely not going to happen. That's not definitely going to happen. The state will rob you, will murder your children, will hurt you, will inject chemicals into your body that you don't want there. They will do that. That's what the state does, because they're not interested in your rights, because they violate them almost on a second by second basis. They don't care. So that doesn't mean, just because we don't believe in a state, doesn't mean we don't believe in organization, doesn't mean we don't believe in justice. It means that we don't believe that force is the way forward. We believe that love, compassion, and mutual cooperation is a better way. And when people try to make this argument that, well, if you didn't have the state, this or that would happen, they always use some example that the state does every time. There would be murder like there is now. There would be gangs of people roaming the street, killing black people with their knee on their neck. Oh, wait a minute. Same bullshit happens in the state.
If we didn't have a state, then there might be a warlord who would, take our money with threat of force.
Right. And like even to the original Bill Gates thing, I have a perfect example of this, that the United States federal government unilaterally agreed not that long ago that's perfectly fine to just dump a bunch of chlorine and fluoride into the water table of all the public drinking water in the entire country. And they just did that. And right. It doesn't matter if you're in rural Idaho. It's like, well, I don't have to drink that water. I have a well. Well, it's in the water table now. And they just did that. With there wasn't a vote on it. That was the EPA that was like, okay, we're just going to dump a bunch of chemicals in the water. Have fun. And it's, it's the same kind of thing with like Monsanto and the GMOs and stuff like that, of where they're having issues of the GMO plants taking over organic fauna and actually like causing harm to the environment. The farmers tried to sue them and the government gave them immunity. So it's like,
right.
We already have all of this.
Yeah, one of the things that a lot of my message is about peace and love. That's just where I've come from. That's where my heart is. That's where I believe God. And I'm sorry if people get freaked out. I believe in God. That's where I believe that God is directing me. And when I say God, I don't mean like this king. I believe everything's God. But I believe
you're dirty pagan like I am. So it's okay.
I am a dirty pagan.
Yay! The heathen podcast.
But But I've been catering. I've learned from Walter Block because I've been reading him recently, and my friend Chad gave me 2 of his books, and I like his perspective. And what he does is the first thing he does before he makes an anarchist case for anything, he just decimates what the state does. And I think that is a really good tactic because it shows people right up front they suck at this. And maybe we don't have all the answers, but we got a couple, and they don't have any. So
Right.
they're only good at violence, and even then they get beat by like quote unquote anarchist style armies all the time. So
yeah,
and I think like that's definitely a thing. Oh, my green screen just decided to die on me. But that's definitely a thing that I have wanted to mention to people all the time, of kind of like a misunderstanding of anarchism, because they don't understand the voluntary aspect, and they come at it from the outside and they're like, I always go to the example of like, how does anarcho-monarchy work? And I'm like, well, if 10 people want to like give one person like unilateral power over it, and as long as they can opt out at any point and they can be like, well, I don't want to do this anymore, and they can leave, then like, who cares? And definitely if we snapped our finger and the state as we understand it disappears tomorrow, there will be a whole bunch of people that will use their new volunteer power and just give up that power to somebody and be like, well, I don't want to deal with all this shit. They'll form an authority. But the key difference between the state and anarchism in that thing is the ability to be like, well, I'm done with this shit, I'm going to go do something else elsewhere. And that like, people get hung up on that. I know, Ace, you say all the time, like, it's not my duty to leave, it's your duty to stop aggressing upon me.
Right.
So it's like, yeah, let me fix this real quick because this is trying to kill me.
But yeah, just piggybacking off what you were saying though, man, it's like a lot of these people would be like, well, there's also, some anarchist types who are like, no, well, any type of, hierarchy at all is just illegitimate. But yeah, from my perspective, if you're telling people that I'm going to forcibly stop you from following a person that you want to give your allegiance to, that seems to me that you're then imposing your will on them. You know what I mean? Yeah. And not the other way around. So
I'm going to use violence to prevent you from being a leader.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, and again, to back up to Locke, these aren't new ideas. In the 1700s, Locke was talking about this on government. He talked specifically that if you want it, because he was attacking the idea of monarchy, and he said that if everybody decides that this person's king, there's not a thing wrong with that. He said when you have a problem is when it becomes like it's the king's son, he's going to be the next king, and you're going to have this divine right of kings. That's when you run into a problem. And so these aren't new ideas. And that's one of the things that I think that we face as well, is people like, oh, you guys are the new guys on the block. No, we're not. This is an old idea. There have been anti-authoritarians throughout history. Most of them just called themselves pilgrims or travelers or whatever that was.
The entire western part of this country was settled by people that were desperate to run away from the government that they traveled all the way across the ocean to get away from, and then found it forming again on the East Coast. So they just got in carriages and bailed westward.
There's a great book. It's going to bug me. I don't remember who wrote it. The Not So Wild Wild West. And it just talks about how like the old Wild West that most people think of is just like a Hollywood creation. It's not real, right? The Wild West was comparatively very peaceful to other areas, and it had very limited to no government at all. And just to piggyback on what you were saying for a second, is that anarchism is one of the oldest ideas. It's not something that's new. The Taoists in 500 BC is, I think, the oldest historical record we have for people who were anarchists. So it goes, and obviously there were probably many more before them that we just don't have the historical record for.
Yeah.
But it's
the one nobody ever talks about. Is my favorite little historical deed. The Cathards, where the word cathartic comes from, was a cult of Christian anarchists that went and formed, grew in a city in France. They were like super progressive for the era. They like had full women's rights. There was no leadership. They were super prim. They believed in living like Jesus did. So they walked around in robes with no shoes on and all that. and the Pope killed them all. That was actually the very first crusade. Before a crusade ever happened against the Muslims, the first crusade was called upon the Cathards. So like, yeah, this is an old idea here. This isn't like a lot of people like to believe that like Emma Goldman like fell out of a back of a bus somewhere and was like anarchism. It's like, no.
Right.
Well, yeah, I just want to add, oh no, go ahead, Ace. Or
No,
whoever's
no, go ahead, Carey. You haven't.
I was just going to say very quickly, I love the history of this. I love that it goes back so far. But even if it didn't, even if it were brand new, oh my goodness, how dare we challenge the paradigm that's been around for thousands of years and still hasn't achieved all the goals it promised it would. Like the fact that that is even an insult, I think shows just how rigid and ingrained the statism is for a lot of people. But I love the history and I love hearing about it. So continue.
Yeah. It's this idea that, well, this is how it's always worked, right? That's what you always get. It's like, well, it's like, well,
it worked?
But also if that was the case, if we just applied that consistently, we would never have left caves and trees, right? We'd still be there. So. Right.
Yeah. And the thing that I was going to point out was that, you know, we don't always call it anarchism. And you know, in reality, in a system where there wasn't a state, we would not call ourselves anarchists. We would just call ourselves whatever we wanted to call ourselves. I would be Marcus. You know, there wouldn't be all of these titles and need for all that bullshit. You know, one of my favorite anarchists is actually Red Cloud of the Sioux Nation. And if you want an example of anarchists here in the States, the Sioux Nation was that. They had they controlled 1/5 of the continental United States, and they voluntarily followed whoever they chose a leader, but nobody had to follow him. They didn't have to. This guy's good at leading people. Maybe we should get behind him and go do some shit. You know, that's the kind of government that they had, and so. You know, I think again, coming back around to the idea that too often we want to just rely on labels and they get in the way so damn much. And at the same time, we have to use that, you know, because tribalism matters, and it does. You know, I feel a kinship when I'm talking with people like y'all. You know, there's that tribe. My tribe are anarchists. And so I think that's not bad, but we really do need, I think, to kind of get past that and just start recognizing that there's some cool ass people out there, no matter what they call themselves. And if they believe in freedom, they're my people. And, you know, if they're not trying to hurt nobody, I can hang out with that.
Yeah, it's weird. Like, I see it all the time of like, somebody will identify themselves as a libertarian or a progressive or something like that. And then people will like click on their bio and be like, oh, that's a progressive. Why are you sharing them? Blah, blah, blah. But then you actually listen to what they have to say. It's a whole bunch of anarchy. And it's like, so we're stopping at that. That's what's going on. And obviously, like with the whole color things, like people brains just switch off when they see like, they have a red and black flag in their bio. There must just be like an annoying Twitter leftist, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no, it's not how we view the world here. Like, that's not how we're going to do that. Like that's the first thing you need to transcend as an anarchist, in my opinion, not to claim what you need to be or be not a real anarchist, anything like that. But like the first step is just getting over that team shit, because you'll notice it with people of like, there are definitely certain individuals like, oh, well, you came here from the right or you came here from the left, because it seeks through like every way they interact with people and how they view people. And it's like, come all the way. Like you got your foot in the door, like come all the way, view humans as human beings. Cause like, to me, definitely the foundation of anarchism is love for people, is trust in people. We don't need to tell other people what to do because they're smart. They're beautiful. They'll figure out problems. We don't need guns and boots to force them to do what we need them to. They'll do it on their own.
Amen.
Well, I've also found too, I think, and I don't want to generalize or collectivize, I have been in this community a long time, like for several administrations. So like I have a decent view of it, but I have found, I think that the people who begin to identify with anarchism, but still cling really hard to whether they're on the left or they're on the right, I don't have any actual data to back this up, but it seems more likely that when things get contentious, when things get more polarized, they sort of revert back to the statism that they came from. And not always. I don't want to generalize people. I know that's not always true, but I've seen a lot of people, actually more on the right, maybe just because it was the Trump era, but I saw so many Ron Paul people, so many anarchists, people who got to anarchism through Ron Paul, then go back to the like, well, Trump is the pragmatic choice because the left is so crazy. So they're still caught in that left-right polarization. And I think the fear of the other, the fear of what the other might do to them using government becomes so center in their mind that they then cling back to the statism because the partisanship becomes the bigger threat.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's crazy to me just because like a lot of the problems that people experience with the quote unquote left of the whole progressive woke mob stuff is because of the government. So it's the idea of like, well, let's lean heavier into the government. Right. And like the best example with it is I like, this was before I got popular. Anyone knew me. I had a lot of obviously like libertarian and right-wing friends on Facebook when I was allowed to be on Facebook. And I was screaming to the heavens when the whole Operation Legend and everything was going on. They wanted to sick the FBI on the anti-fascist protesters. And I'm like, don't do it. Don't, no matter how good of an idea it sounds, don't do it. Don't release that beast. And they did. And then what happened? A couple months later, January 6th happens, and the FBI have billboards on the interstate outside of my house, like calling for people to snitch on their friends. And they're running around grabbing these same people that just gave the FBI a bunch of power. And it's like, how many times do you have to go through this whole rigmarole? And just like that whole thing of Biden asking people to snitch on their family for extremism, in the comments, people were like, oh, just report all the anti-fascists, or, oh, report all the Trump supporters. And it's like, guys, how many times do we have to go through this?
Yeah, those people are Stalinists.
I don't get it.
Yeah.
Like, oh.
Yeah, and the thing is, we had last year, is probably close to a year ago, we had a friend of mine. He was an activist monster. His name is Adam House. He's a great guy, and he's into like Thai boxing. He's a great guy, real interesting person. But he said he hated Trump. I mean, hated Trump with a passion. But he said we are so fucked if Biden comes in here, because what Biden's going to do is he's going to do a rope-a-dope, and what he's going to do is, and don't get me wrong, still hated Trump. But he said Biden's going to do a rope-a-dope on Antifa, and he's going to do a rope-a-dope on Black Lives Matter. And as soon as people start, giving him more leeway to do what he needs to do, or the tyrant in heels, because we all know that's where this is going. But right, But what's funny is he could have had a crystal ball, because we're watching that. That is happening right now. What we were, Magnus and I were talking about before we came on, the fact that the FBI visited Adam's property this week and were actually questioning him whether he was a fucking Trump supporter. I was like, do you have Google? Does the FBI
who Adam Kokesh is?
Right. And so, of course they're going to overreach. And my guess is this is going to be the first time they go after Adam, and they're going to build a case because they took a phone from him this time. They're going to build something else, and then they're going to build something else. And the next thing you know, they're going to search his property, and they're going to violate him. That's what I think is going to happen. And they're going to use, well, you might have been at June 6th or January 6th to do that. And there's no way in hell Adam was, I know, I scheduled for Adam versus the Man. I know he wasn't there. I'm 100% positive. That doesn't mean that people we know weren't there. Of course they were. They thought it was hilarious. Right.
It was the clown fiesta. That's why I call it.
Right. But they're going to use this shit as an excuse.
The picture of them scaling the wall, and then somebody put the text underneath it of Honky Kong, and it killed me because it was so funny.
Right.
But and they don't even care if you're there, because the two people I bring up, Daniel Baker and John Slavinsky, they were arrested in Louisville and Tallahassee, respectively, for posting things on that day that were considered inciting riots, just posting things. They
Right.
were, and they're being charged with like what's the exact terminology? Not participation, but involvement in the January 6th riots and inciting riots. Daniel Baker posted a flyer on Facebook, and John Solinsky sent signal text messages, and that they arrested them on over January 6th, and both of them are getting 5 years in prison.
Yeah,
So
this is where you can really see like some like left wingers are actually like really fascists when you scratch them underneath the surface. It's like it's really like saddening to see, because it's like. Obviously, I'm coming at this from an anarchist perspective, right? But the outrage that, oh, these people entered our sacred building. Oh no! When it's like if you look at the damage of that building, for one, it's not legitimately theirs. But besides for that, the fact that a few doors and windows were broken, and now these people are going to face 30, 40 years in jail. That's insane. It's insanity.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to say, all it should tell people, and all of us know that was all bullshit. It was an op. But if the Capitol building is that goddamn weak that a bunch of old people can walk and crazy people can walk the fuck in and break the door down, woohoo! We just got a couple days, guys. It's our utopia is about here, because if it's that goddamn easy, it's almost here.
Well, yeah, the whole thing with the National Guard, putting the National Guard all over the Capitol. Obviously, like, I'm horrified by that, and I think that's a problem or everything. But I went to D.C. like a couple weeks after that happened. I was in Washington, D.C. They don't allow them to have guns. Mm-hmm. So you have all these National Guard just walking around Washington, D.C., and they're not allowed to be armed.
Do you know why? Like, is there any kind of internal directive? Like, do we know why?
Well, yeah. Like usually the National Guard, when they're deployed, even during like riots and stuff like that, they're not allowed to have magazines in their guns, because you start touching on posse comitatus there real quick and things start getting awkward. But it even got as far as like Nancy Pelosi had to get shut down by the Guard because she wanted like 50 cals and stuff like that. And they're like, we're the National Guard. We don't do that. So it just goes, like you said, to the point of like the idea is stupid. And, we talked about earlier of like how statism is a religion. These people literally worshipped it. You never saw a better example of that than when people were referring to the fucking Capitol building as a temple.
Oh my God.
We didn't even make that joke. The anarchists, that's usually our thing. Like usually we make that connection. No, they said that.
Yeah, they said that. That was their words.
Like, holy fuck.
Well, and that's the thing too. I find it so curious because I have a video on this. I have not released it. I'm waiting for Biden to do something shady with the domestic war on terror because I want to wait until then. It's not urgent. Right? Yeah, I'm just hobbling it for now. But I had to go through all these clips of politicians talking about the insurrection at the Capitol and the subversion of democracy, and they're all so offended, in their words, because democracy was assaulted. But you look at these people, it's Nancy Pelosi, it's the Mitch McConnells, it's these people who have had power for decades, done nothing but screw people with it, like subverted democracy. Not that I believe in its legitimacy, but if we want to work within this narrative and this structure, these people don't care about democracy. They care that their power was threatened. Do I agree with I'm not going to use mean words. Do I agree with the people who stormed the Capitol? Of course not. Was it funny and fun to watch? Obviously. Do I think that their solution was best for humanity or had any integrity? No. Even if Trump won the election, it was absolutely stolen. It's conclusive. To be honest, I did not even look into it enough to form an opinion because I do not care, because it's illegitimate. Right. It's not legitimate no matter what. But I lost my train of thought. But point being, it has nothing to do with representing people in a coercive system. It's because they got scared that maybe their power is not absolute, and maybe not every single person in this country accepts their authority for whatever reason, whether it's because of an election or because we just inherently don't believe in it. Either way, that's very scary for them.
Yeah,
seeing those like terrible, terrible people hiding in fear inside that Capitol building was one of the best moments of my life. I'm not even joking.
Yeah, and I went on some liberals podcast after I blew up, and we got onto that subject, and I just casually brought this up because I don't know, I'm an anarchist and I think this way, and I know all you'll agree with this, but I guess it was the wrong thing to mention to a liberal. I'm like, the worst thing about January 6th is the fact that we had all of these men inside Washington, D.C., inside the Capitol building, and none of them were taking servers or laptops or downloading everything off their files and posting it to the internet, and they got so offended. They're like, you would want them to do that? And I'm like, yeah,
And that's the moderate position.
Dump all that shit on the internet. Are you kidding me? That one dude did take Nancy Pelosi's laptop and then committed suicide 2 weeks later. So,
you know what I did for that time? I was having a conversation January 6th with some hoteps. Among them was Hotep Daryl, who's one of our like big followers. He's on our Anarch chat. He's a great guy. He's probably watching. But I remember Uncle Hotep came out and was like, "These are the white people I've been waiting for." He's like, "Yes." He's like, "Go get them." Yeah. But what came of that was this shirt.
Yeah, hell yeah.
That's
the crazy thing. I made a meme all the way back in like June, and it actually went viral a little bit. Of it's like the SpongeBob Patrick meme where he's like showing him the license and they're like arguing back and forth. And it's like it was me to these conservatives, these Trump people. It was after like the election had happened and people were arguing over it. I'm like, so you think that the government is wildly corrupt? You think all of the corporations are in on it? You think the elections are totally bullshit and unbiased? It's like, yes. It's like, okay, so stop believing in the legitimacy of the government. And then they respond, well, black the blue. And it's like, fuck. Like, how? It's so true of like, how is it that anarchy or even just libertarianism, we can be soft of like minarchy, libertarian. How is that considered an unpopular thing in America when we have 10% approval rating in the Congress? Like I not to quote Matt Gaetz, but like he did have this great thing where he brought up that Muammar Gaddafi, I think he said had like 46% approval rating in his country, and his own people dragged him out of a car and beat him to death and killed him. And it's like, but in America we can have 10%, and that's perfectly fine. We don't even complain that hard about it.
Yeah, it's how dare they touch our trash? Like
Right.
What, you aren't even happy anyway. Who cares? Why not let them be scared? Even if you disagree with the people doing it, I would be just as pleased if it were leftists storming the Capitol. I genuinely would. Would I agree with them? Again, and no. But show them that they are not superior to us. They do not have special rights. Right. And I think that idea of special rights, I've ripped this off from Larkin Rose completely, but I think that drives so much of the reaction. It's not just, it's an assault on our democracy, as if they would care as much if there were, incidents at the polls. It would not be the same reaction. They had like a flat out panic attack that their sacred temple was breached by the peasants. The peasants who disagree with
being in combat.
Yeah.
Right.
She wasn't even in the building.
Right.
Oh my God.
But what we're facing is just misinformation. We live in a propaganda society, and because I've witnessed this, I'm a member of a pagan place here in Indiana called Lothlorien. Okay. And Adam, when he was running for president, was coming through Indiana. And I said, dude, you got to stop at this festival. These people are largely, big C communists. Communists. And so Adam pulls up in his fucking RV, with all the bullshit all over it, and absolutely welcomed with open arms the idea of localization, of taking the power from DC, from tearing that shit down, was absolutely welcomed. And the reason for that is because, yes, they've bought into some collectivist bullshit, but ultimately they are anti-authoritarian. And that is the foundation of the American culture, is anti-authoritarianism. And they have not beat it out of us yet. They want the propaganda to say that they have, but they haven't. And you can scratch a conservative, you can scratch a liberal often. And if they're not a member of some bullshit, governmental office, generally you will get to, I hate the BMV, I hate dealing with government. Every time I see a cop in my rear view mirror, then I know that I'm in trouble. And those kinds of things are in every city, are in every community. And all it takes is for the vast majority of people, and I'm ripping off Rothbard here, but the vast majority of people to see the illusion, and then they're done. They will pass away like any other mafia gang.
Right. Like there was a post today about the ATF, where we realized that there's only 5,000 ATF agents in the entire country. And my buddy Troy was like, dude, we could all get together and literally eat them one by one. And they couldn't do anything about it. And it's like, yeah, like the numbers are so important when you realize just how fucking tiny of a group we're dealing with here and how we let them rule us. It's ridiculous.
Larkin Rose has a great video on this. I think it's called the tiny blue dot or something, or the tiny red dot, where he talks about like, okay, here's a dot. This represents the government. And then he pans out and then there's like a million other dots and this is everyone else in the country. right? So yeah, I think speaking of Larkin Rose, going back to what you were saying, Marcus, is that once the illusion's gone, because that's what the state ultimately is, right? The state is ultimately in the mind. It doesn't exist in actual like material reality. All there is in material reality are people with guns who will tell you what to do and shoot you if you don't, right? So the state is ultimately it's a prison of your own mind. It's a prison of your own making. And once you realize that, oh yeah, I have no duty to obey these people, then it's gone. The illusion's gone. You are free, right?
Yep. For sure. and it's that simple, and it can be done. Sorry to bog it down with history, but history is one of my gigs. But Osho, Rajneesh, man, to the testicles on that dude. He said, I'm gonna have a community, and he went and bought a bunch of land, started a community, and then was like, fuck your government, I don't care. And I don't care what you people say and all that kind of stuff. But what he basically said, one of the tenets of what his cult was all about, which taught, by the way, that cult taught you to think for yourself and that you owned yourself and that all authority was bullshit.
And you could leave anytime you wanted.
Right. But as soon as but anyway, his basic philosophy was that all freedom, every bit of freedom, and I'm messing up the quote, but all freedom is innately spiritual. There is something about the human soul that cannot be locked up, chained, or thrown in a prison cell. And that's the facts. Many times, and yes, I use Adam a lot, but the bottom line is Adam is one of my best friends and he has been very good to me. So I'm going to use him again. But Adam was, when he was in jail, he had the jailers going, okay, wait a minute, this dude is freer than we are. How does that happen? And, because he's in jail for loading a shotgun. How does that happen? And the answer is because they cannot chain you. And whether or not you believe in an afterlife or not does not matter, because this time that we have here is limited. No matter what you believe, it is limited. You are not going to live forever. And I want to leave this world better for my children. And that's my spirituality. I want something for this world that is freer. And I don't have that now. If I could get back to the Ronald Reagan days from when I was a kid, I'd get there. I don't like Ronald Reagan. Don't get me wrong. Not my hero. But I'd take him over the bullshit we're dealing with now.
Yeah. Scale everything back.
Yeah.
And
go ahead.
Real quick, and then you talk Ace. Would it be an anarchist podcast if there wasn't a completely unrelated argument going on in the comment section?
No.
Literally nothing to do with what we're talking about.
Right.
That's great. But what were you going to say, Ace?
Oh, Marcus, that reminded me. Do you know who Albert Camus is?
No.
By chance? Oh, man. Yeah. So he has this great quote. He was an absurdist philosopher. He has this great quote, which goes, it's one of my favorite quotes. It's the only way to live in an unfree world is to become so absolutely free that your very existence is an act of rebellion. And that's my anarchism.
For sure.
And that's the thing is like people are followers to a degree, but I'll use a contemporary example with the masks. Like as soon as the store said I could come into there without a mask for any reason, obviously it was if you're vaccinated, but I'm not, so go fuck yourself. I went in there, and the first day I was the only person, and then because I work out of this grocery store, I'm going in and out of there all the time. Like second week, I'm one of 20%, 30%. Now there's 3 people in there with masks every day, and everyone else isn't. And it is just because me and a couple other people just started saying fuck it. And that's so naturally human, because if you're it's pretty much anything, if you're at a beach or something and you say, well, and you don't know the local laws, and you're like, well, I want to have a barbecue, but I don't know if they're allowed to have barbecue on this beach, so I'm not going to do it. But then some guy just comes out and sets a grill down and starts barbecuing. We're going to be like, well, fuck it. I guess I'm barbecuing. You know, like it's so normal. And it does take like unfortunately, there's going to be a lot of people that go down, and there's people that have already gone down. But the more people that just say, I don't care anymore and I'm going to do whatever I want, the less and less they can do anything about it. And the more people see you doing that, the more they do that themselves.
Especially when the thing you're doing is handing out food, is helping people who are in need, and I hate to beat on the drum, but that's what we have to do. And whether it is actually giving to the poor or doing things like that, any kind of way that we can show people that we are the good guys. That's what we got to get to these people's minds, and come on, look at us. You can tell, all of us, except for Ace, who I can tell from his picture, but
I just always assume you have a smug smile on your face.
Right. We tend to smile. I think that you get us together. Now, you get us together, probably going to be some illegal activity going on. But you get us together, you're going to have a bunch of people laughing, smiling, and generally having a good time. You get a bunch of statists together, and generally they're bitching about stupid shit that does not matter. They're talking about this person didn't say the right gender pronoun, or this person didn't do that, or this other thing, but we, on the other hand, tend to do good things like, give to people and help people and give them a hand up. That's what we tend to do.
Right.
And we do it from a place of love and not a place of force. And all people, and the reason that we are becoming more and more successful is because people are beginning to see it.
Right. Speaking of that, I was just at Childerberg down in Texas, and it's a libertarian like camping trip, and there were like, I don't know, maybe 100, 200 people there. It was one of the best experiences I've ever had of just, a bunch of libertarians. It's not this, it's not what you think if you think, oh God, they're going to be talking theory. No, it was just the most chill people I've ever met. So yeah, when anarchists and like libertarians get together, it's a great thing.
Who's going first?
You go first.
No, I was just going to say I've been to a lot of libertarian anarchist events, and across all of them, I think there's something so valuable in not just, okay, we're like-minded, but having it's almost like a sense of security of like, okay, I can trust that these people aren't going to try to control me. Like there's a baseline sense, like a shared sense of morality that is so invigorating. And
everyone left their stuff around. No one stole anything. It was just,
it's like that. And it's so important too, just to let people know they're not alone, because I think inherently, because of the paradigms we're in, anarchism and associated philosophies are very much, they're for misfits, it attracts people who sense that they don't belong in the normie world. And so it's so important. I've seen it with people. Every single event I go to, they're just so overjoyed that they're around people who this sounds like a status thing to say, but they feel safe around. They don't worry about a violent threat or a coercive threat. It's just, I can be at ease. Like no one's going to sit here and convince me that I'm their property. It's just a very baseline sense of not only safety, but excitement at it. Because when we are alone, it's very much like, oh my God, it's hopeless. No one agrees with me. We're in endless feeds of statism. And it's so inspiring to be around a nice group like that.
It was funny because I was actually about to make like the exact same point from like a personal anecdote of when we had when we had the event in Lansing, the Boogaloo event. There was like 25 of us in one house, and a BLM activist decided to come over because they kind of want to see what we're all about, and we're all having a party. And then, so we're talking like 25, mostly men, 2 women with guns and alcohol and drugs to like a normal BLM activist. And the next morning they talked to me and they're like, you know what? Like Magnus, like I never felt more comfortable than I did last night. I wasn't worried of a dude taking advantage of me or like anyone trying to hurt me or start a fight. There was no arguments or anything there was argument, but not that kind of arguments. She's like, I felt really relaxed around you guys. And that's the same thing with me. Like when I'm with my people, when I go to like a convention or an event or a protest and I'm around a bunch of people and I know they're all anarchists, like you do just relax. because you're like, okay, we're all on the same wavelength here. We don't have to explain a bunch of stuff to each other, which is also so nice of you not having to like go through like the whole table of contents before you can actually start having a conversation with somebody. You know, like that's so nice. And it is, you're absolutely right of like that. It's there's a peace, there's a serene to it. And I definitely think like we all need to get in the meat space like more often. Like the internet is great and all, but like Twitter isn't real life. Like Discord is not real life. Podcasts are not real life. Like just having a local anarchist convention where you go sit in a park and do nothing. Like you'll feel better and more positive change and ideas will come out of that than 100 people in a Twitter group chat shit posting. Like more tangible, more real life thing.
Sure. Yeah, and I'm going to speak it into existence. I have been focused for some time, and I'm invested in Bitcoin, and I'm hoping that eventually that just goes through the goddamn roof, and I wind up with a sizable amount of Bitcoin. And so what I'm hoping is to turn that Bitcoin into property. I live in Indiana, the crossroads of America. I want to build an anarchist community. I want to create something that people can come to and do that twice a year and do that. That is something that I desire. And I've gone a little bit farther than I've, I'm going to draw from my experience at Lothlorien, which is the communist thing I was talking about earlier for pagans. I'm going to build off some of the things that I learned from them because they had a commune since the 80s. And but as soon as I can get that, I also want to build off of that with some anarchists don't like to camp. And so one of the things that I want to do is
anti-camping action.
right. But let's be clear. That's a thing. And so I want to build basically a hotel with maybe 10 to 15 rooms, and
all of this violating local property ordinances.
Of course. But seriously, I want to do that. And I've learned what I learned from Lothlorien is I'm going to use the state against itself, and I will file it as a religious organization and probably start my own religion. And so that I will get those kinds of protections. And so that if they come in, I will at least be able to file suit that my religious beliefs, which are going to be called voluntary voodoo, just to be clear.
VD, that's perfect.
Yeah.
I know. I'm in. So, but I'm going to establish that so that we can do exactly what you're talking about. Because so often I want to go to a lot of things. I don't know about y'all, but I got a day job and I've got to, put food on the table and do those kinds of things. I got a family. And so for me, I can't go to California. I can't go to Texas all the time. I can't do it.
So
now,
is your grand plan just to get people to come to you?
Yes, that is my grand plan. Come to Indiana.
Okay, so we are coming up on an hour and a half. So I'm gonna start moving towards wrap up. I don't know if it's Phobes, whatever he's been posting. He wants to know really bad what the anarchist position on doorbell bombs are. I think they're perfectly fine. I don't know. If don't touch my doorknob. I don't know, but I'm the Boogs, so I'm crazy like that. So maybe everyone else real quick opinion, so we can appease this man because he's been posting in the chat for like a half an hour straight. Be like, what about the doorbell bomb? So,
well, who's ringing? That's the first question.
Right.
That depends.
Yeah.
Is it the government?
Look, all I'm saying is the scourge of Girl Scouts has to be dealt with. So I'm perfectly. But all right, so yeah, to wrap up, I'm going to ask like a quick question and then give me y'all's like 2-paragraph answer to it, and then we'll plug all of our stuff and get out of here. So we're going to start with you, Marcus. This is a question I just thought of literally because I needed one. What like ideological group do you struggle the most with trying to convince into anarchism? Would it be like neocons, liberals, Trump conservatives, like tankies? Like pick your group.
I would say regular conservatives. And the reason that I struggle the most with them is because I think a lot of people like to knee jerk think that the left is the problem. And I actually don't think that it is. The people that worship the state the hardest are the Republicans. And you can see it in everything they do. They wrap themselves with the flag. They do all that kind of stuff. And they do a lot of like basic, nodding to freedom, but they don't actually believe in freedom.
They're the most performatively free group of people for sure.
Right. Yeah. And so I'd say that is probably the group that I find the hardest. What I find funny is that Black conservatives or the HOTEPs, those people are almost already anarchists. So, but yeah, I'd say the conservatives. Do you want me to plug now or wait to do that?
No, afterwards. That'll be the second round of when we go around. All right, Ace, who's your hardest group to deal with? I'm gonna guess it's neocons, seeming you war with them constantly. But
I don't know, because I don't actually try to convince them of anarchism. I try to make fun of them and then pretend they don't exist. But I would probably say it's probably neoliberals in general, to take a generalized group. But then again, conservatives who love cops. It's a toss up between those two. For me, yeah.
Okay. And what about you, Carey? Is it going to be the same answer?
I'm sorry to do this, but I got to do a 50-50 split, man, because on one hand, the liberals get me because I came from the left. So there's like this internal conversation going on with me. Like, it's almost like my own self-shaming that I then project onto them. It's like, how could you be so hypocritical, because really
that's how I am with the left. So I understand that completely.
Right. And I think that the values are there, the intentions are there, of course, but obviously the means to achieve them is very, very backwards. And that's the frustration for me there, is that refusal or that inability or that apathy toward the use of violence in achieving their policy goals, the use of force. But then you go to the right and it's this like, oh, you're so close, but so far. Like, you're still jerking off to the Constitution. Sorry if that was too vulgar to say, but like, to them,
no,
it's
this is a domestic terrorist podcast.
Okay, true. I didn't even cuss. I just said I don't know, something, whatever.
So risque, Carey.
Well, but one of the I know. Sorry, Twitter has made me more like just. I'm just gonna barf it out. I'm usually very careful with how I express myself, but oh my god, Twitter is not a good influence on me. But the thing about them is, I find with conservatives, everything comes back to, well, if they just followed the Constitution. And there's this refusal to accept that maybe that document was flawed, which to me, again, is hyper hypocritical because, like, you guys, it's a government document. And I have a whole internal theory that I have never made a video about why this conservatism is so anti-freedom and people are so attached to it. And it's because they're collectivists, as much as they want to call themselves individualists. They love America. They identify with America, and then their politics stem from that. But of course, then they're going to be super attached to the founding fathers and to the Constitution, because that's all wrapped up in the Revolution and all the American glory. And the Constitution sort of just goes hand in hand with the mythology of fighting the Revolution. So as much as they think they're anti-government, they're so freaking pro-government. And that is my long-winded way of saying, you're both just awful.
When conservatives say, well, if only they would follow the Constitution, it's like saying, well, if only the gunman would read the no gun-free zone sign and then turn
exactly.
around.
Magic sky cloth and magic paper. And you're absolutely right about the conservatives being collectivists, because I saw that of like, I hang out with BLM people all the time. You want to see some vehement, like Stalinistic communism? Take someone with a BLM hoodie and put them in front of a Trump supporter. They'll immediately be like, so you support this and you believe this and blah, 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 just because they have a Black Lives Matter hoodie on. It's like, dude, for all you know, that person went to Walmart and was like, oh, that's a thing, and bought it. Like, you have no idea what they believe, but like immediately. And obviously the polar opposite with the Trump hat, to where people have made like ironic Trump hats just to bait people into arguments. Like my favorite one literally just says, made you look, asshole, fuck everybody. And it's like, yeah, exactly. But all right, cool. Let's do our plugs. Marcus, where can people find you? Do you have anybody coming up? What are your plans?
We have lots of people coming up. But you guys can figure all that out. Either I would go to anything Aquarian Anarchy. We're on MeWe. We're on Facebook, but sorta. I'm banned. So it hadn't gotten updated in a very long time. The best place to find me is on Twitter, and it's reverse the. You can see it there at Anarchy Aquarian, and but on YouTube, Aquarian Anarchy, anywhere that's Aquarian Anarchy, MeWe, Float, I'm everywhere. And I do want to tell both Ace and Carey, reach out to me either in DMs. I'd love to have both of you on the show myself. And because you do both offer solutions, and that's what we're about. We had Magnus on already, and that was one of my favorite episodes we've had.
It's super fun because you get to talk to the hoteps, and they actually like, they're interested in anarchism, but they're not anarchists, which is really rare because usually people either are anarchists and they're interested in anarchism, or they're not and super dismissive to where like they're like, tell me more. What about this? Well, and they're like, it's like childlike curiosity. So that's why I love the hoteps.
Yeah, we call ourselves the anarch wing of the Hotep Nation, and so yeah, definitely check us out there. Like I said, we're on everything, and you can also get a hold of me. Probably the best email to get a hold of me if you want to talk, or if you want to come on the show, is probably marcus@thefreedomline.com. It's Adam's site, but it's a long-term email. I've had it for years, and it's the easiest place to get me.
Hell yeah. All right, Ace, what about you? Are you making any appearances? Where can people find you?
Sure. So you can find me on Twitter at ace_archist on Twitter. And I also co-host a podcast called Slurp Gang with my two other anarchist friends. And it's not a political show really at all. It's just three anarchists hanging out with guests and having a good time.
Hell yeah. And all right, Carey, where can people find you? What do you have any like shows you're appearing on? Any videos you're releasing, like secret behind the scenes, anything for people? Let me know.
I have so many videos I'm excited about coming out. They're longer than my normal content, and I do everything for my videos, so it does take some time. But I have one coming out on Israel, which if you have seen my first Israel video a long time ago, you'll have an idea of what it's going to be about. So this is part 2 to that, and I'm so excited.
Carey breaks the internet part 2.
I don't think I can anymore because my YouTube channel is so freaking shadow banned. But you can find me there on YouTube, Carey Wedler, CareywED as in dog, LER. And I'm on Twitter now. I was gone for a long time. I'm back this year. I was banned in 2018. I'm on Facebook. I never post there. It makes me physically ill, but technically I do have a Facebook page. MeWe, Hive, Float, Minds. I got to get better at posting on all these, but I'm like, I can barely handle the normie platforms. How do I have to hire a poster or something. But as far as other content, I do have that domestic terrorism video that's going to come out. And then my favorite one that I'm really excited to finally get done is about toxic femininity and how it relates to statism. So that's going to be a very fun one. And I'm going to be using myself as the example. So that'll be, if I'm going to call something out that hard, I like to use myself as the, like I did with my Obama video. Yep. Oops. Yeah. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, I was an Obama supporter towards the shirt and then used myself as the vehicle to explain the folly in that. So I like to do that. So that will all be coming soon. And I might have one tomorrow, but probably not. It'll probably be next week.
Nice.
Yeah, but I don't. People are getting really mad that I said I am the boog. I literally mean like I'm the boog on this show. I do not mean like I am the boogaloo. Like, no, come on, calm down. But yeah, no, definitely. Like, I'm sure we'll make appearances in your domestic terror video because your most recent one about the Second Amendment. There was a bunch. I'm like, hey, there's a bunch of Hawaiian shirts in there. That's my boys. So, like,
I love using you guys. Whenever I'm talking about gun rights, I love using you guys
because it's always pictures of us with like a super like ethnically, racially, and gender diverse group of people, all like happy, like with guns and shit. So it's super funny.
Exactly. I just think that's really useful to use when messaging to the left, especially about I'm not going to go into it. We're done. But I have videos on my YouTube channel you can watch if you want to hear what I have to say about that.
I would say that to close on that and to bounce off that really quick before I go. My favorite thing whenever I see gun control arguments is just taking my friend Queen, who's like a super strong black woman, and has pictures of her. You actually use it in your video. She's the black girl that's braided. Yes. And I just post pictures under them like, stop asking cops to kill my friends, and they like seize up. I'm like,
that does not compute. Glitch.
Right. I appreciate everybody for showing up here. Thank y'all for coming.
Thanks for having us.
You guys are
thanks
great.
for inviting me.
Yeah,
Yeah,
this is my favorite anarchist on Twitter right here. This is the group. This is the Avengers of anti-statism right here. I love it. But yeah, definitely everybody. Next week on Thursday, I actually have a show planned in advance for once. This is so rare for me. But I'm having Steve from Slow News Day and a bunch of anonymous activists to talk about how the feds literally hunted down Commander X for bringing down a PayPal site like 10 years ago, and now they hunted him for this whole time. So we're gonna be talking about that. That's super fun. I might start making videos again. I've been slacking on that, but otherwise I'll catch y'all next week. Go see all these lovely people's things because they're great. Go watch all of Carey's YouTube videos because they're the best.
I hope we're still friends after. I have a very different persona in my YouTube videos.
Yeah, but I'm telling you what, he's not bullshitting though. Go check her videos out. Her one on the state as a religion.
The War on Cops one that literally taught me things I didn't know. I was like,
cool! Thank you.
I was like, wow, there actually is like no violence against cops. This is all bullshit.
I had my friend, another anarchist who has a master's in math. I was like, please look over all my data and make sure I'm not doing something dumb or inaccurate. So it's all been fact checked. Like that is all solid data. Just put it out there. I didn't do the math. My friend did.
Oh, yeah. So we're gonna say,
yeah, those videos are really good.
Thank you.
Cool. All right. Appreciate all of y'all. I love all y'all. We're going to take it off then. I will see y'all next week. Stay safe, stay free.